Yep, if you have issues with those, just let me know. Passcode is their main number and let them create. Yep, have a good day.
Hello and welcome to another segment of our Swope Health Black History Lunch and Learn. Today we have with us Eric Wesson, who is the publisher and managing editor of the Call newspaper. We're glad to have him with us. This was a rescheduled event because we were supposed to have Eric last week, but there was a big event going on here in Kansas City last Wednesday with the Chiefs parade. So, I know a lot of us wanted to see that. And so Eric graciously rescheduled for Tuesday this week to talk a little bit about us of what the importance of the work he's doing and the work of the Call. So let me first welcome Eric and welcome to Swope Health and having us here today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. This is a great
Well,
concept.
I appreciate it. This is the second year we've done this, having these lunch and learns for Black History Month, and they were very successful. So we started off with week one with Alvin Brooks, and last 2 weeks ago we had Gwen Grant, and so you were week three. You were our third speaker of the month. So again, we're just glad to have you here. I will say I wanted to start with a little bit about your background. So can you tell our viewers and people who are listening, both in Swope and outside of Swope, a little bit about your life?
Born and raised in Kansas City, went to all the schools that I went to are no longer in existence, except for Southeast. And I graduated from Southwest during a time when there was 22 Black people in the graduating class and within the entire school. Got out of high school. The next day went into the Marine Corps, where I served for 6 years, finished my college degree, got out, came home, decided that I wanted to team up with Dwayne Crompton, who was a mentor to me at that time, and wanted to do something because I felt that Black boys, once they got outside of the fourth grade, and in many cases third grade, their test scores dropped and they were just hanging around school long enough to drop out. So I wanted to do something to make a difference. I taught elementary school and I taught kindergarten and third grade. A lot of people didn't think that I had the patience to do that, but that's what I did. Took a walk on the wild side, came back, finished college. I graduated from Morehouse, graduated from Howard University as well. My master's degree is in clinical psychology, early childhood development, and my bachelor's degree is in political science. Came back here and I've been here ever since.
I think a lot of people don't realize that you are a Morehouse man, which I knew, but a lot of people don't know that.
Yes.
And
And I always distinctly make the difference between I didn't just go to Morehouse, I graduated from Morehouse.
that is an important note. So tell me, how did you end up at the Call? I know you said you were teaching for a while. So how did you end up at the Call newspaper?
Well, I felt like that the Call was, during Miss Bluford's era, the civil rights era, those struggles, Mr. Franklin's era. I thought that, that was relevant for then, but I kind of felt like that the Call was kind of like a go along to get along. It wasn't trying to ruffle anybody's feathers. They were bringing people the news, but there were a lot of things going on here that I felt needed to be addressed in a more aggressive manner. So I came in one day, I talked to Donna, and she gave me an assignment. She said, here, go get me this story. And Rosa James had kind of laid the path for me to make the connection between me and her, and my pastor, the late Reverend Earl Abel, had kind of paved the way for me. So when I walked in, she gave me a Post-it note and told me to go get this story. That was August the 23rd, 2002.
And do you remember what the story was about?
It was about the lady who had a daycare center and she was slinging crack cocaine out of the daycare center. And in one particular case, she was putting the crack in the baby's diapers and sending it out with the babies. So she was slinging out of the daycare center and trafficking. So that was the first story that I did.
Wow. And how long did you work under Donna for those years?
I worked under Donna for 15 years.
Okay.
No, I've been here for 21 years. I worked under Donna for 18 years.
Okay. Okay. So
And I
let's
worked
talk
with
about
Ms. Bluford for about a year before
okay,
she
let's
got
talk a
sick.
little bit about the history of the call. So tell the viewers who are not familiar with the call what the call is and how the call got started.
Well, the Call is a African-American owned and operated newspaper that is an advocacy newspaper. And by that, I mean that we have the ability and we have the privilege to put a slant on the story to where people in the Black community can understand and relate to what we're talking about. It's not biased by any means, but it is presented in a way where we're fighting for the people who are voiceless. And a lot of times in the media, you get the mainstream point of view and that's it. But there's always a different side to the story. So that's what that's what Mr. Franklin did when he started the paper. It was like, these things aren't right. Let me write about them. Let me inform the public. Let me tell people what's really going on. And that's how he built the paper. He was
And
a very unique person at the time. He was extremely wealthy, considered in that day as a Black person. And he was like, he focused a lot on lynchings. It wasn't so much local issues as it was national issues. And people might not know this, but the Call had a national issue paper too. And that's where he talked a lot about the lynchings, segregation. When integration came along, it was just a conversation, but he died before it was fully implemented. So he was pretty aggressive in his approach on how he wrote.
so I remember my grandmother would tell me about the call, particularly about the fact that, about the death notices that Black people couldn't be in the regular paper for death notices. And so that's what made the call so widely popular locally, was that because that was where Black people could go to do death announcements. And I know even to this day, that is still a major part of your business.
It is. And so here's the story and here's the history about it. A lot of times people say this is the dead people's newspaper. Young people say that. But Mr. Franklin and A. Philip Randolph were boys. They were really, really good friends. And so they worked out a deal where every week Mr. Franklin would give the Pullman porters here in Kansas City, give them copies of the newspaper or bundles of the newspaper. And along the Southwest going into Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Texas and those areas, they would throw bundles of papers out on the train stops. So people would get the paper, they would look at it, they would see the obituary in there, and in that obituary was where that person worked at or lived. So they would know that it was a job opening here. So they would move up. And you have a lot of people that migrated here from Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Arkansas based upon the Call newspaper and the death notices. They knew a job was opening because they put where they worked in the obituary, where they lived. It didn't have the exact address in there, but it had what part of town they lived in. So it was a job opening, you knew where housing was. So people from Louisiana would move up here, men specifically, get a job in the packing house and other areas around here, and then send for their families. I've met a lot of people that migrated here from the South based upon the Call newspaper.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago and Pat Jones talked about the history of Black people in the labor movement. And she talked about Mr. Arthur as it relates to the Pullman Porters. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship that he had with A. Philip Randolph?
Mr. Franklin, they were boys. It was like, you in town, come on over. He was very pro unions. He was very pro Pullman Porters. And a lot of times when they needed to get their message out about getting raises and the pays and the things that they needed, they used the Call newspaper to help get that message out. So they were like really, really cool. There's a lot of pictures of them that I've heard that are in our archive files down in the caves. So yeah, they were real cool.
And where do you keep, and I was going to ask you about that, how do you keep track of your archives with regard to, because the history of the call, I bet you have a lot of great photos through the civil rights movement, through the different eras of this country, kind of like I'm reminded of like Johnson Publishing, like when they sold off all their archives and their photos. Where does the calls keep all of that, and how do you keep that restored for historical purposes?
Well, we keep them in the caves over in Independence. They are in a climate controlled room along with the back volumes of the papers. And at last count, I think we had all the volumes of the papers from when the paper began until probably 2000 when the roof started leaking over at the building. And then some of those were damaged, but we keep those in the caves, climate control. We have a lot of archive files. The tragic part about it is that Donna used to let, and as well as Ms. Bluford, used to let people come in and say, hey, we're going to catalog this information for you, give them access to the photos. We give them 25 photos. We might get 23 of them back or 20 of them back. And we've lost a lot of pictures like that, but it is extremely valuable information. And I would just like to see somebody come in and catalog it, you know, loan it to or lease it out to the historic Black museums and let people see some of the stuff that we have. We have a picture of Muhammad Ali when he was fighting in the Golden Gloves.
Wow.
Yeah, send a lot of things. And another thing about Mr. Franklin and Miss Bluford, where they were good friends with Harry Truman. And we've got a lot of pictures of them hanging out together as well. So we got a lot of good pictures. I just wish we could do something and catalog them, scan them, and loan them out to museums across the country.
Well, that actually is an interesting idea, because I was involved with archiving a lot of the photos, as you know, for Freedom Incorporated. So that is really worth doing if you can get somebody to come in and archive them for you and show a pictorial history of the organization.
Yeah, because you figure 103 years of pictures, we've got quite a few pictures.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll talk a little bit about, for our viewers who are watching this, what is the purpose of the call today, right? You talked about the past. How do you appeal to younger generations? And as we move forward with technology where news is on your phone, you get breaking news. I know you guys are a weekly paper, and there aren't a lot of weeklies anymore. And even the Star is struggling. Most print media is struggling. The Star is struggling with regard to even doing a daily now. And I don't even think they do a daily every day anymore. But how do you remain relevant, right, to a younger generation? How do you remain relevant where news is always coming out every day and you come out once a week?
Well, one of my long-term goals is to, of course, update our website so that it is more current. By that, I'd like to see a section of our website to be, if there's something going on down at City Hall, we have a reporter there, a camera there, we can take pictures and document that, and then give people a blurb of it right then. And I also would like to be able to come in and do those updates like daily, and then get that next generation of readers. The problem that we have with younger people is they like clickbait. By that, I mean, they like stories that are sensational. They like stories that are current. but they don't like stories that are necessarily accurate. And I'll give you an example. When Kobe Bryant's helicopter crashed and they said that there were people on that flight that weren't on that flight, and they said that they had died. And I think Rick Fox was kind of made a joke about it. He said, I looked at the news and discovered that I was dead. And I was sitting there watching the news, so I hadn't been on that flight. But it's like, what is the connection between young people and today's media? And do they want stories where we spend a lot of time investigating and reporting stories, or do they like stories that people rush out and put together that aren't accurate? And one of the things that I learned, I went to a workshop and seminar that the NMPA, which is the National Negro Newspaper Publishers Association, had a workshop last year or the year before last, and I went to it. And one of the things that I found that was interesting from the Nielsen family was that young Black people can't read. So in order to get their attention to read in a paper, you have to preface it with a picture. And the problem that we have is a national problem with young people. So it's like finding that medium that we can connect to them, because I'm charged with something that is really a task in and of itself, is maintaining the newspaper, the next generation of readers. Miss Bluford, Mr. Franklin, those readers are dying, and they looked at us and relied upon us to bring them information that was relevant and pertaining to the Black community. Another issue that I have is that the struggles that we had back then are still the same struggles today. They just look different. And how I present those struggles to let people know that because you live in Blue Springs and Lee Summit and Independence and all these places that Black people couldn't live back in the day, we still have the same problems. So it's like, you know, during that period of time when Miss Bluford took over the paper, it was the civil rights struggle, getting equal rights, equal access to things. So that was a focus, a topic that people could talk about and relate to and want to read about. Today, it's really the same thing. It just looks different. So making that connection, and it's not really easy. I am blessed and fortunate that we have a niche audience, and in our niche audience, they want to see, well, what is the Black perspective on this situation or that situation? So it's like putting that all together and being able to package it all and present it in a way where people want to read it or are interested in it.
So when you talk about, you know, having staff and things like that, how are you able to, as a Black newspaper, how are you able to cover all of these issues that you think are important with a limited staff?
Listen, you talk about a limited staff, it's just me in the newsroom. It's difficult. I have to pick and choose. I need somebody like me, you know, and I tease people about this all the time. When I was here and it was just me and Donna, she never had to really worry about anything other than editing because I was out hustling stories. And it has gotten to the point where I'm fortunate enough, and I have the respect of the community, that people will give me stories and I don't have to go and bird dog or hunt down stories to do. So that's a blessing, but it is extremely difficult for one person to be doing it, and I can't cover everything. So I'm thankful that people will send me the information that I need. I might have to make a phone call, do a quick interview, and then put the story together from there. But it's difficult, and I've been looking for a staff writer now, I guess, for about 8-9 months. I can't get them at UMKC journalism school. Can't get them at Penn Valley. So it's just pretty difficult. Now, this is what I do get. I put the ad in staff writer experience, and you know what I get, Deron? I get a lot of people saying, I write poetry. I'm like, okay, tell me, when was the last time you looked in our paper and saw a poem? I need somebody that knows how to write hard news stories. So
Right,
it's
right.
difficult. It's difficult. But what I do try to maintain and do, and it's difficult, but I do it. I do try to I write all the editorials, and I try to do at least 3 local stories every week. And that
So
runs me really thin. Go
is
ahead.
there much collaboration from your counterpart in St. Louis on issues that affect statewide issues like the St. Louis American, which is our counterpart in St. Louis? Is there much collaboration on some of these statewide issues that you're dealing with, that we deal with here in Missouri?
It is to a degree, and it depends on what it is. They do connect with me. If there's something that they need to get that's from about our local politics, then their reporters, their managing editor and publisher there will call me and ask me, well, hey, what do you think about Barbara Washington doing this or doing that? Or what do you think about some of the other local elected officials in the State House? But yeah, they do call. Corey, her people call quite a bit to kind of see what Congressman Cleaver's thoughts are, what he's doing with this and what he's doing with that. But I think out of everybody, Corey Bush, her people and the St. Louis American call me more about what they do than anybody else.
Okay. So one of the questions we have here in the chat is, how can churches change their messages and information to be more relevant within the call or within the newspaper business that they use? Because I know you get a lot of church information.
We don't get any church information.
Okay.
There has been a disconnect between the call and the church community for some time. And I think it goes back to one of the things that I talk about when I'm doing speaking engagements. When churches were relevant and a part of the community, it was because the church members lived within the community. And now when you go to churches in our community, you see license plates from Johnson County, you see them from all over the place now. So there's not that same connection that it was when Reverend Abel, because Reverend Abel, when I go to Palestine, Reverend Abel was our mailman. So while he was delivering the mail, he was, connecting with people in the community to get them to come to the church. So those days and that connectedness, I think very few pastors now even live in the community in which the church they pastor. Most of them live in the suburbs, but we don't get a lot. And I have reached out to them, trying to get them, to get ads to advertise their events, but they say they don't have it in their budget. And a lot of people are still in the philosophy that advertising costs when it doesn't, it actually pays. So we don't have a real strong relationship with them. I think the Globe does, because they put all of those little business card ads in there and they give them free papers, but we don't have that relationship anymore.
So I guess in your strategic plan for the call, where do you see the call in the next 10 years?
Well, strategically, I would like to have a functional website, of course, with updates. I want to make sure that the message remains the same. First of all, I want to make sure that we stay relevant. And that's the key part. And that is bringing people stories and information that they can't get anywhere else. So I want to make sure that I'm doing that as well. I want to make sure that the next generation, who I can pass the baton to, is connected to the community so that they can get those stories as well. I want to turn the building into an apartment for the third floor. And then I want to be able to create a museum for the warehouse area and take some of those pictures that we have, put them out and let people see the history of the newspaper, and not necessarily in the same fashion that the Black Archives has, but I want to be able to do that.
Do you find, I know you were saying that there was you're having a hard time just getting a staff writer. What do you see as sort of the future of the call in terms of somebody to follow you as a publisher for the call? Because it sounds like the work that you do is relevant, it's important, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of people going into journalism, period.
There aren't. The last time I went over to UMKC, they had 3 people in their journalism class. There's a lot of young people that are going into media as far as in front of the news camera, those kind of things. But print journalism isn't as glamorous as other aspects of journalism, and it certainly doesn't pay the same way. You have to maintain several different hustles in order to maintain what it is that you're trying to maintain. So it's like, how do you make sure that you tell them that above all else, you're documenting history? And that's one of the things that I like about it is, one, I like doing the research. I like presenting people with alternatives to thinking. And I like the accuracy that I'm able to present when I'm putting a story together. I like interacting with people, getting the information, sharing the information that I get with other people. So it's, you have to be able to understand that that's part of the game. But most importantly, you're documenting history. For 103 years, every Friday, 52 weeks a year, for 103 years, the Call newspaper documents history. If nothing else, the fact that we get a paper out every week with limited staff, limited resources, you're a part of history. And that's something that they can never take away. They can erase tapes, they can do all of those things, but once it's in black and white, you can't ever do anything about it. You just got to live with it. So that's one of the messages that I always have for young people. But I tell them it takes dedication and it takes work. Stories aren't going to fall in your lap. You're going to have to put forth some effort to do it. And how bad do you want it? How bad do you want people in your community to have the conditions in their lives change? You know, one of the stories that is not one of my glamorous stories, but one of the stories that I did that I felt, it's actually 2, that I felt the best about was there was a lady that lived over in the area of 27th and Wabash. And she was getting raw backed up sewage in her basement drain. And evidently something had happened with one of the pipelines. And she had called the city hall, she had called everybody that she could think of to get something done, and nobody took an interest in that story. And when I went by her house on one of the only occasions that I've ever gone to somebody's house to do a story, when I went in her house, you could smell the sewage from downstairs in her basement, in her living room. Actually, you could smell it out on the front porch. And I wrote the story, I called Wayne Carlton. I'm like, man, you got to do something about this. And the city finally stepped in and fixed the problem that was going on in that lady's house. And it made me feel good, and it made me know that the power of the press still exists. The other story that I remember doing that was the most impactful for me was trash. On 55th and Prospect, or 59th and Prospect, excuse me, that car wash over there, every week, it just looked like a dumping ground. And so I was telling Terry Riley and other people about it, and they were like, yeah, okay. So I took the front page of the paper and I put no words in there other than the caption was, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I took pictures of trash all over the city and put all over the front page. That's all the front page was. And that afternoon, the paper came out in the morning. That afternoon, the city had trucks all over the place picking up trash. And so Terry Riley said he took the paper in there and gave it to Wayne Carlton, opened it up, put it on his desk, and turned around and walked away. Wayne got on the phone, got Public Works out. They cleaned that car wash up pretty good that afternoon, and they just picked up the tires and stuff that was everywhere. So those, to me, outside of President Obama getting elected, those were the most impactful stories I can think of. Am I rambling?
One of the questions we have in the chat here says, does the Call newspaper have a strong social media presence?
No, we have a slight, we might put a blurb out there, but no. And I tell you why we don't. Because of the inaccuracy that's in a lot of social media circles. They just put stuff out there just to put it out there. And they call that clickbait. I think that because I research information and put it out, I think that speaks volumes rather than sensationalizing a story to get it out there, to get somebody to click on it so that I can get a check from Facebook for likes and dislikes and anger marks. So, no. And it's hard to get people from social media into a platform that you want. One of the things that I was telling you about that conference that I went to is you get on social media, you can put events on there, people will click on there and like it, but it's hard to move people from in front of a computer to an event. So I take that into consideration as well. So I don't really do a lot of that per se. And I know that's the future, that's the next generation, but I'm gonna have to be able to do that to exist. I just haven't done it as of yet.
Well, one of the things that I was talking about some of these other weeklies that have just sort of, who have been here for years and years and just not made it. You know, in South Kansas City, they had the Jackson County Advocate, which had been in existence for 70 years. It ran its last paper maybe 2 years ago. The Northeast News, I believe, is one of the other local weeklies that are struggling as well. But you and the Call have just sort of had a lasting power. How do you financially make it work compared to these other weeklies that have just sort of bit the dust?
Through our obituaries, through proper management. I kind of pat myself on the back with the management, financial management of the paper, because there was a time where we would get checks and couldn't cash them. And there was a time where we just didn't get checks at all. So one of the things that I did when I took over the paper was change how we did accounts receivable. And instead of extending a lot of credit to people for a long period of time, I said, look, y'all put y'all stuff in the paper. We're going to invoice you. You need to get us a check within 10 days. So that's worked. And just making a statement that we need to get paid just like you do. So that is one of the things that I've done. I've been a stickler about getting national advertisement. I think the last one we got was from General Motors, but I feel like Black people spend their money on a lot of things. We have a niche audience. We should reap the benefits that come along with people selling their products in our neighborhoods to people that look like us. So I've kind of aggressively gone after a lot of those people as well. This place up here on Prospect that sells the cars, I just have a problem with them anyway, but I'm going to be pursuing them a lot more aggressively on how they sell cars to us, and that we don't reap any benefits of it. I think they might run an ad on Carter Broadcasting, but they don't advertise with us
Okay.
at all. So that's my plan.
So one of the things that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, and some people may be, from the Swope Health perspective, Eric leads our Swope Health podcast. You want to talk a little bit about that, what guests you've had, and it's gone on for a little over a year now.
And I love it. It's so much fun. I did one this morning, and I think it's a great idea. I think that Jaron is, and he is the executive director, president of Swope Health. I think he has remarkable vision on what the future of healthcare should look like and connecting that vision to the community. I think he does a remarkable job with that. And I want to be able to be a part of that. But what I do is I have the opportunity to come in and talk to a lot of different people, share some insight one-on-one with them, ask them questions, they give answers, and we kind of explore some of the things that are going on. A lot of things is health in the Black community, and where we have a tendency to take a lot of things for granted, but I love doing it, and it's fun. It really is.
And who are some of the guests you've had on the show?
Let's see, I've had the mayor on. I've had Bob Kendricks. Bob Kendricks was a great interview, a lot of insight about Bob in that. Jim Nunley has been on. Melissa Robinson has been on. She was just on. Actually, I think she's on now. Louis Dogood. Melissa Johnson, I had her on today. That interview will come up in the next couple of weeks. I've had Dr. Collier on, the new superintendent of Kansas City Public Schools to be. And I'm going to have Jaron on as soon as I can get an exhale moment when he ain't, doing what he does. But yes, it's a lot of fun.
Okay.
I'm going to have you on there to talk about what's going on in Jackson County politics.
Okay, we can do that then. So one of the other things we were wondering, and we always ask our guests here, who would you consider your mentor in life, in your career? Who was your biggest mentor?
Oh, that's a great question. Mentoring me in the newspaper business, I would say Donna and Louis Dogood. Louis Dogood was a great role model for me. And the reason why I did this, another reason why, was because of Louis and being that voice in the Black community that was so needed. Donna, of course, to teach me the ropes of the newspaper business, the behind the scenes part. The in front of the scenes part is kind of self-explanatory, but behind the scenes, how to connect with people, get resources, and be able to just store them up for when you need them. So those have been my two biggest resources and role models. Of course, my parents, my family has been mentors to me, because they're in so many different ways, because my family is so diverse in attitudes and personalities. So that's helped me a lot too.
Well, Eric, I want to thank you again for taking this time with us today. You have really, really given, I think, a lot of us a lot of information. Any closing remarks that you might have?
No, I'm just looking at all these wonderful people online here. And what are they writing questions in the chat? Because I can't see the chat. So
No. I've been asking the questions as we go along. Yeah.
No, I just want to have people make sure they support the paper still, and know that print media, although people think it's obsolete because nobody reads the paper again, and they do. And the fact that I print the same number of papers now that I have Well, it's gone up a little bit, but since I've been here, it lets me know that people are still reading the paper. And we're a staple, and we want to remain a staple in the community. We want to continue to bring relevant issues to the community that people should know about. Here in the next couple of weeks, you're going to be getting bombarded with political information because the city council meeting, city council election is coming up. The presidential election is coming up. So those are a lot of things that we would be able to share with the community. So we want to be able to continue to do that. And you know, one of the things that I always tease people about is people say they only read the paper because of the obituaries. But trust me, people read the paper. They will tell me when they don't like something that I wrote. They tell me when I like something that I wrote, when they like something that I wrote. So people do still read the paper, and I appreciate that as well. There's no such thing as constructive criticism. It's just reading the paper. I don't try to classify as this positive or negative. If you have something to say that makes sense, that's relevant, please let us know that what we're doing. Oh, one other thing that I want to let people know about, because we get this a lot. Mail subscriptions. Woo! Every Friday, we take papers to the post office. We leave them there. We give them a check to deliver the papers. Once the post office has them, that's out of our hands. There's nothing we can do about it. So calling us on Mondays or Tuesdays, fussing and cussing at us because you didn't get your paper is not our fault. We've done everything that the post office said. Because here's the thing that people don't realize. The post office, the printer that we have in Jeff City, or Columbia, excuse me, they used to take the papers to the post office in Columbia at 12 o'clock on Thursday evening or Friday morning. People used to get their paper Friday or Saturday. So the post office said, we're not going to do that anymore. Y'all need to bring the papers down here on Friday evening and then or Friday morning, and then we'll mail the papers out from there. That's what we do. And since we've done that, it has been an absolute mess ever since then. But they tell us what to do, we do it. So when y'all want to call and fuss at somebody, call your local post office.
Oh, wow. And how many papers are you printing?
How many we print or mail out?
Well, how many do you print? You said you print the same number.
We print 10,800.
Okay. Okay.
And so we count that as 45,000 people because they say in every household, 4 people read the paper. So we counted at 45,000 people as our connecting base. We mail out, in addition to those that we print and put on the street, which is the 10,000, we put another 2,000 in the mailboxes. And then our online subscription is about 450 people.
Okay.
That read online. But most of our mailers are outside of Jackson County. I think 70% of them are outside of Jackson County. But what people will do is they'll call and fuss at us and say, hey, I missed such and such funeral because my paper didn't come until Wednesday or Thursday. And so we catch the brunt of that.
Yeah, my great aunt is one of those people who gets it. She lives in Atlanta. She's from here, but she lives in Atlanta now, and she is a paid subscription to keep up what's going on in Kansas City, so she gets it in the mail.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, what I tried to do during COVID was decrease the number of papers that I printed because people weren't moving around. So I was just wasting money because people weren't buying papers. So that entailed drew up my number of people reading the paper online. But after COVID and people started moving around, then
Right.
it drove my printing costs back up. And it costs a lot to print a paper.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
It's
sure.
a lot.
Well, Eric,
Every
thank you
time gas
again.
prices go up, printing costs go up because they have petroleum in there.
Well, thank you again for being here with us today. I'm glad we got
Thanks
you
so much.
scheduled. And any final thoughts before we end tonight?
I love y'all. Keep reading the paper. I see some of y'all on here on the attendees that I know. My auntie is on there. Hey, auntie. And so people. So thanks a lot for having me. And you keep up the good work too. I want to give you a shout out. You know, not only the work that you do with Swope, but as a Jackson County executive, legislator now, you're already moving the needle, and we appreciate that. And we need people that are in local government elected positions that are fighting for the people. So kudos to you for all the work that you do. When I grow up, I want to be just like you.
Oh, you're better than me, Eric. I appreciate it, though. Thank you again, and thank you all for joining us. And join us tomorrow. We have Bridget Williams, President CEO of the Heavy Construction Association. Thank you so much, Eric. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Y'all
Bye.
take care.